Alright, cool. There's this little setup. I included it in my estimate, but we start timing not quite yet. Yeah, sure, is the mic working? Alright, so we've got a short setup that I'm doing right now before we start on the run. So this is a setup for a glitch that I'll explain kind of after the run starts, but basically we're going to get a lot of the moves from the start of the run rather than having to learn them throughout the run. Now hopefully I can get a certain minigame here. Let's see. Alright, cool. So this setup can take really long or really short depending on what minigame you get. This is a good minigame, so we can start the run very shortly. Alrighty, I'm ready whenever you are. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so I'm the 8bitbeast, and this is Banjo-Kazooie. This was a platformer released for the N64 in 1998. And this category is any percent, so pretty much we're going to beat the game as fast as possible. We don't need to collect everything, we just need to collect enough that we need to beat the game. There's a lot to talk about with what any percent is as a category, but there's some stuff that's going on right now that I want to explain first. So we're in Spiral Mountain now, and we've just talked to Bottles, and we've told him that we're good enough and we don't need him to teach us the moves. So there is some stuff in Spiral Mountain, honeycombs as you can see down the bottom there. But those honeycombs only give you extra health, and we don't need that to beat the game. So we're going to beat the game on the starting amount of health. This trick here is called Bottle Skip, and you do a precise high jump on this corner, and jump across. Now normally Bottles talks to you there and wastes a few seconds, but doing Bottle Skip there just saves that time. And we're into Grunty's lair. So you might have seen before the run started, I was in Furnace Fun, which is the quiz at the end of the game. And I was setting up a glitch called Furnace Fun Moves, or FFM for short. What FFM does is it basically lets us start the run with almost all the moves. The way that it works is we have a file that has the moves that we want already on it, and then we go into Furnace Fun and go into a minigame, and we get game over in the minigame. What that does is, in the minigame, it sort of temporarily stores our moves to give back to us after the minigame, and getting a game over doesn't clear that. So we get a game over, start a new file, and we'll have a lot of the moves. So I don't have the moves right now, but as soon as I go into this door here, I'm going to have all the moves. So you'll notice I was rolling a lot before, but now I can get into Talon Trot, which is the move where you're on Kazooie's legs. And Talon Trot is a much faster form of movement. We also have almost all the moves. The only moves that we don't have are the moves for flying and the moves for invincibility, which uses gold feathers. So the reason that we don't get those moves is because if we learn them during the run, then Bottles will give us the refill for red feathers for flying, for example. And we want that refill because otherwise we're going to run out of red feathers really quickly. But I've learned all the moves apart from flying and gold feathers. And you'll notice that I'm going to get some eggs from this hut here. I have learned eggs through FFM, but we don't have any eggs. So we need to pick up eggs before we can use them. And we've got Mumbo's skull coming up here, so there's some notes that we need in Mumbo's skull. We're going to run around Mumbo so that we skip the trigger to wake him up. If we wake him up, he talks to us and says, "Hi, I'm Mumbo," and it wastes a bunch of time. So we just skip that by walking around him. Just going to break these few huts here, and then we've got the Jiggy with Juju the Totem Pole. And I only have 5 eggs and there's 4 poles, so it's important that I don't miss 2 shots here. I can miss 1 though, but I didn't miss any, which is really good. Coming up as well is Ticker's Tower, so if you've played this game casually, you'll remember turning into a termite and using that to sort of climb this termite tower, because if you try with Banjo, the slopes are too slippery. Well, there's a specific way that slopes work in this game, and the way that they work is if you're not over the slope for too long, then you can kind of climb up without slipping off. So you have about a second over a slope before it makes you slip off. So normally we need the termite to get up here, but we can just climb up here with Banjo. So making your shadow go over the flat ground is a way to reset that slope timer, and that resets the second that you sort of have to climb the slope. So we're not supposed to be up here as Banjo, but it saves transforming into the termite. Now you'll notice I'm moving in Talon Trot a lot, which is the move where you walk on Kazooie's legs, and I'm jumping a lot. You'll need to get used to that sound of Banjo jumping because it's the fastest way to move normally. The reason jumping is faster is because when you jump it puts you up to maximum speed instantly, but if you just start walking then it takes a little while for Banjo to speed up. Also, when you jump and land, you have this little slide on the ground, but when you reach the end of that slide, you lose a lot of speed. So we actually have to keep jumping, otherwise we lose that speed. So yeah, you're going to be hearing a lot of jumping in this run. And I'm going through and collecting a lot of notes and jiggies now. Notes are used to make progress through the lair. There's certain note doors that you need certain amounts of notes to open, and there's 100 notes in each level and 9 levels in total. You need jiggies to open the levels. So that's what jiggies are for. Now I'm going to go and feed Chimpy here and try and stand where he is. And what that'll do is I'll be in the spot that the jiggy lands, and I'll be able to collect it right away without having to walk into the jiggy. Notice Banjo does a dance when he gets a jiggy. That's about 4.5 seconds. We call it a jiggy jig, and they're really slow, so we want to skip as many as we can. This one will be sort of skipped here, so I'm going to stand where the jiggy is in the cutscene, and we sort of overlap watching the cutscene with the jiggy jig there, so that saves time because we don't have to watch both separately, we can do it at the same time. Coming up now is hopefully an example of the first jiggy jig that we're actually going to skip completely. So I landed in the water, and if I start swimming here, Banjo still has the jiggy in his hand. He hasn't done the dance yet. And if I went on to land now, he'd do the dance. But if I just jump in and out of the water, then he doesn't do the dance. And we're done with Mumbo's Mountain now. So you saw me skip a jiggy jig there, and I did that by swimming. You can also skip jiggy jigs if you're flying, or if you're a transformation like the termite, walrus, the bee, or even the washing machine. You can also skip jiggy jigs by taking damage at exactly the same time, or you can skip them by getting 2 jiggies at once. And it skips one of the jigs there. I'm going to try and Talon Trot into this door here. Unfortunately, I missed it. Talon Trotting into that door just saves a bit of time because you're watching the get into Talon Trot animation while you're watching the enter the door animation. So this is one of the puzzles. Each level has a puzzle, and it takes a certain amount of jiggies to open the level. So right now I'm opening Clanker's Cavern, which is the 3rd level, but I'm actually not going to open Treasure Trove Cove. That puzzle's in this room, and it takes 2 jiggies to open, but I'm just going to leave that. And we have a trick to get into Treasure Trove Cove without opening it. So in this game, when it lags, it kind of speeds Banjo up to compensate for the lag. And we're going to manipulate that to get into Treasure Trove Cove. So I'll put it on a laggy camera angle here, and hopefully we should be able to jump through this cannon. And now we can swim out of bounds. And we're into Treasure Trove Cove without opening it. So that trick's really difficult, and I actually found it last year, and that was one of the last tricks we found for the run. Luckily, it's pretty close to the start of the run, so if we don't get it, we just reset. That trick's actually easier on the PAL version. We used to use eggs for it as well, but since then I found that laggy camera angle, which you don't need eggs for it anymore. Pooping eggs just causes a bit more lag, and it can help sometimes. So So if you played this game casually, you'll remember draining the water in this sandcastle and getting the Jiggy in here. But we actually don't need this Jiggy. It's a little bit too slow for us to get an 80%. So yeah, we're just going to swim because it's faster. And something that they don't really mention very much in this game is that if you hold the R button to swim and fly, it actually makes it a lot easier. So both swimming and flying, if you hold R, it just makes you turn a little bit sharper. And yeah. Oh. I was supposed to jump from the tree there, but no biggie, we'll just go up here. So you'll notice me managing these notes so that I don't reach the end of my slide. And I jump before I reach the end of my slide here. That's just to stop the little slowdown at the end. And these trees can be a massive pain. But luckily that's all the trees that we have to deal with in the run. I'm going to go and get the gold for Blubber, who'll give me a Jiggy for it. So as you saw, we're not getting every Jiggy, we just need enough to beat the game, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Along with jumping in Talon Trot, it's also a lot faster to jump up slopes, which is what I'll do here. And we're going to learn flying from bottles. This is one of the 2 only moves we're going to learn in this run. And we already have all the others from FFM. I'm going to do a trick in here called a quick dive. So if you exit Talon Trot as you're entering the water, Banjo sinks really far. So that saves swimming down. And that's going to be really useful in this run, just to save little bits of time everywhere. And I'm going to give Blubber his gold here. And hopefully he's in a good spot, which he's not, unfortunately. He's walking into the good spot. I'll wait for him here. There we go. So if you're standing in this spot, you're under where the Jiggy spawns, and it saves a little bit of time because you overlap the cutscene with the Jiggy Jig. When I did it then, it probably didn't save any time because of how long I waited, but well, it's cool to show off. Here's the first Jiggy Jig skip with flying. We're just going to get this Jiggy in the lockup here and try not to land. There we go. So I want to talk a little bit about any percent in this game. So with this game, as I said, you need 810 notes to beat the game. And there's 9 levels and 100 notes in each level. So you do need to go into every level to beat the game. Now those levels take a certain amount of Jiggies to open each of them. And then at the end of the game, there's this door called Door of Grunty. And that takes 25 Jiggies to open. So in total, you actually need 94 Jiggies to beat this game without any glitches. And there's 100 Jiggies in the game. So any percent traditionally was really close to 100%. And for that reason, not many people ran it. But in 2012, a person called Chronicies found a glitch called Door of Grunty Skip, or Dog Skip. And that allows us to skip that final door for 25 Jiggies. So that brings the total from 94 Jiggies down to 69 Jiggies. And after that, shortly after that, a glitch was found called RBA, also by Chronicies in 2012. And that lets us take the B out of the final level. So in the final level, you get a B transformation. Usually it's restricted to the final level and a little bit near the final level. But with RBA, you can take the B out of that area and kind of bring it into all the other parts of the game. And that allows us to get into a lot of levels without opening it. In this run, we'll see the B used to get into 3 levels without opening it. That brings the total from 69 Jiggies down to 41 Jiggies. Then we also have Frazizi Peak earliest Banjo, and we also have TTC earliest Banjo, which we've already seen. So that brings it down to 31 Jiggies, which is what we'll see in this run. Getting that Jiggy in flying is quite difficult, and it's very easy to land there. So I'm glad that I got that. It's very bad if you miss it. Yeah, so pretty much with any percent, the big bottleneck is 810 note door. If we had to skip for that, it would save about half an hour on this run, but there's no known way to skip that, unfortunately. Now we're almost done with Treasure Trove Cove. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit low on health here, so I'm a little bit concerned about what to do with Nimber. I'll go for it. We'll see what happens. Alright, that's good. That could have gone very badly if I died there, because in this game, if you die, you lose all your notes for that level. And it saves your best note score, but it would only save me as 93 notes rather than the 99 that I'm going to get. Luckily, I didn't die. You might be wondering why I don't get 100 notes. That's because there's 900 notes in this game, but we only need 810, so we can sort of skip 90 of them. Now, ideally, what was going to happen there is I grab the Jiggy and fall onto the crab. That skips the Jiggy Jig, and it brings you back to the start of the level. Unfortunately, we had to watch the Jiggy Jig there, but it's not a big deal. So we're done with Treasure Trove Cove now. We're going to move on to Clanker's Cavern. Now, you saw me open Clanker's Cavern before. There is actually a method to get into Clanker's Cavern without opening it. Me and Isotage found that, I think, last year or the year before. But anyway, that's called Clanker's Early, as you might expect. But unfortunately, that trick is too precise for a human to pull off. So nobody's ever done it, but we know it's possible. That's something that you would see in something like a tool-assisted speedrun. And coming up next is the Taz block, actually. So yeah, in the Banjo Taz or tool-assisted speedrun, you'd see Clanker's Early. In RTA, which is what I'm doing now, like a normal speedrun, you won't see it. But that's okay, because we still skip a lot of other jiggies in this run. Clanker's Cavern's a level that's all about swimming, and if you played this casually, you'll remember it's probably a really annoying level. But luckily, if you have a lot of practice at it and you remember to hold R while swimming, it's not really too bad. The thing about this level is everything's on cycles, so Gloop down at the bottom, which will give us air, is on a cycle, and Clanker himself is on a cycle, moving up and down out with his bolt. So right now, I can only save or lose time in multiples of 10 seconds, which is how long one of those cycles are. How long one of those cycles is on Clanker. Also with swimming, so A does a slow swim and B does a fast swim. You won't see much A swimming, but you can just hold the B button as well. I didn't know that for a really long time, and I used to try and press the B button. But now you can just hold it, which makes it good. I'm going to be getting a lot of stuff underwater here as well, and I'm going to be raising Clanker. So this next section is going to look really scary, but it's planned out, and hopefully I shouldn't drown. Alright, I'm just going to give up on that other key turn there, because if I tried to get it, I would drown. Alright, there we go, plenty of time left. So another thing about this game is you have transformations from Mumbo, and I think there's 5 transformations in total, and each of those take Mumbo tokens to get. We're going to need the pumpkin transformation, and the reason we need the pumpkin is because the pumpkin is used to raise the water level in one of the rooms of Grunty's lair, and you actually need that to progress through the game. You can't beat the game without doing that. The other transformation we need is the bee, and the reason we need that is because of that RBA glitch that I mentioned before. So those are the last 2 transformations, and as a result they take a lot of Mumbo tokens. We actually need 45 Mumbo tokens in this run altogether. So you've probably already seen me go out of my way for some really slow Mumbo tokens, like the one behind Nipper. And that's going to continue up until Click Lock Wood, where we won't need them anymore. So unfortunately I've missed this 10-second cycle here because of the key, but it's not too big of a deal. I'm going to try and do a thing here. You can use the height from ground pound to climb up the pole a bit. It's not really recommended for real-time speedruns, but the Taz does it a lot. Oh. So I fell down there unintentionally, but all that happens now is I just switched to a different route. It's not really a big deal. So upcoming is the Snippets Jiggy, and in this Jiggy you have to kill these 4 crabs and they spawn a Jiggy. I'm going to try and kill the last 2 in a specific way that I can have enough time to get where the Jiggy spawns, but it is really difficult, so it might not happen, unfortunately. Because the crab hit me, I can't get up there. But ideally, you stand where that Jiggy is. Now that I'm done with Snippets, I'm going to be on a cycle that Clanker's on, so he kind of rises up and lowers into the water every 10 seconds, and I'm going to try and catch the cycle where he is just at his lowest point so I can jump up onto his back here. Usually you do have to wait for it a little bit. Yeah, I just missed it. But this is the thing that means that you can save or lose times in multiples of 10 seconds in this level. Another thing about Jiggies is you don't want to grab them in Talon Trot. So you'll notice whenever I go to grab a Jiggy, I'm usually pecking before I grab it. You get a little animation if you grab the Jiggy in Talon Trot. It's about half a second, but it does lose time. So you notice I did a high jump at the end of my roll there. At the start of the high jump, you keep your roll speed, so if you want your roll to last a little bit longer, you do a high jump for the extra distance. We're going to learn Gold Feathers here as well, and you can get into Talon Trot as you're learning it. That saves a little bit of time. And you normally need Gold Feathers for this, but yeah, you don't. So the intended method is to use Gold Feathers there, but by running along the seam, you don't need them. So I've got stocked up on Gold Feathers. Buttles gave me the refill. We don't really need the refill, but we can't learn it in FFM because we don't know flying on our FFM file, and you need flying to get Gold Feathers. So I just jumped on his rib to get up into the gills here. You're not supposed to get up here before you raise the water in this room by doing the rings Jiggy, but that skip just lets us get to those notes without having to get that really slow rings Jiggy. And now that I'm outside, I'm going to be on these 10-second cycles again. So all I have to do is catch his bolt before it goes up, and that's really easy to do. I even have time to grab this note that I missed before. And I'm going to be doing a Death Warp soon, just like in Treasure Trove Cove. So I'm going to jump down here and take some full damage intentionally. And that doesn't actually lose any time because I have to wait for his tooth here. So this game's all about just tiny little time saves, saving half a second here and there. But you'll see that there are a few really big skips as well that save a lot of time. And now I opened his tooth to get the Jiggy there, and if you shoot his other tooth, you get a Mumbo token. But we can actually grab the Mumbo token without shooting his tooth with a clever high jump here. And I ground pounded, and you get a little bit of hide at the start if you ground pound, which gives you just enough to reach the Mumbo token there. And that's all in Clanker's Cavern. So we only got 98 notes. The other 2 notes are really slow, so we don't get them. Normally at this point in the run, you would open Bubblegloop Swamp. But as I mentioned before, we have the RBA glitch, which lets you take the bee pretty much anywhere in the lair. And we're going to use that to go back to Bubblegloop Swamp rather than opening it. The bee can get into Bubblegloop Swamp really easily without opening it because, well, in general, they don't put roofs on these rooms in the lair because they're not expecting Banjo to fly around in them. So when you have the bee and you can fly around, it's really easy to get into levels without opening them. The bee can actually get into 8 out of the 9 levels without opening them. The only one it can't get into very easily is Mumbo's Mountain. There is a way, but it's really stupid. And we do Mumbo's Mountain as Banjo anyway, because it's the first level and we have to. And it's only one Jiggy. So coming up is a trick called FP Early. It's going to start with this egg shot that looks like it shouldn't work, but it does, to break the web there. And FP Early is an interesting trick. We use it to get into Frazizi Peak without opening it. And as you can see, the doors for Frazizi Peak are just there, they're closed. But FP Early, we're basically going to get out of bounds in flying. And it's got a really interesting history because Chronicies originally found it in 2012, but it wasn't useful to get into Frazizi Peak then. because to do FP early, you need to move from Frazizi Peak to do it. But now with FFM, which was found in 2015 by Linkus, we actually can do FP early because we already have the move from Frazizi Peak. That move is the Beak Bomb move with flying. Now this is really tricky, so hopefully I can get it first try. And we got it. Now we're flying out of bounds. And just going to navigate over to this door here. I'm going to take it a little bit careful for marathon safety. But there we go, that's FP early. So that just saved 8 jiggies. Now we actually have to do that clip again that I did to do FP early, that flying clip on the slope. But next time we're going to use it to skip the 450 note door instead. And that clip, as I said, it's quite difficult. It's really hard to learn, and you can get it fairly consistent. But the issue with it is, if you miss that clip and you lose flying somehow, then you actually have to go and spawn the fly pad again. And that takes about 40 seconds. So every time you miss that clip for FP early, you lose about 40 seconds. So it can be a real big run killer. And if I'm doing a serious attempt, then if I miss FP early, I just reset, which can be a pain because it's about 20 minutes into the run. FP is a funny level because we're going to get all the notes, but the jiggies sort of take a really long time to get. So we're only going to get 1 jiggy, but we're going to get all 100 notes. That'll be a theme with any percent because we need lots of notes, not many jiggies. I'm going to try and grab this jiggy with a Beak Bomb. And yeah, that's really hard. I've probably only ever done it about 20 times. But this is the backup here. You just fly into the pipe. And ideally I should be flying back out of there, but that's what happens when you land. You have to find another fly pad. So I just got to get into this fly pad here and then we continue on with the route. So yeah, with this game and any percent, as I said before, any percent and 100%, if you don't use any glitches, they're really similar. So people used to just do 100%, and 100% is still the more popular category for this game, because any percent has a lot of, it used to be PAL only for a long time, and it has a lot of movement as the B. PAL only meaning that you could only do it on Australian European consoles. Now you can do it on pretty much any console, and yeah, and now it's really different than 100% as well. So in this game, to get 100%, the world record is 2 hours and 1 minute, and well, 3 seconds by Stivity Bobo. And for any percent, it's separated between N64 and Xbox, but the category that I'm running right now is N64, and the world record is 1 hour and 11 minutes, and I have that world record. So hopefully I can get pretty close to that time today, but we'll see. There's also a middle category called any percent no RBA, which doesn't do that B thing that I was talking about, and that's about 1 hour and 19 minutes. So upcoming is a trick where we're going to get some notes in the icy water. I need to make sure I have full health here, which I do. Oh, that's pretty bad actually. We'll see how it goes. Oh, all right. Now I'm going to have to think about exactly what I'm going to do there. Normally you can punch that snowball for some extra health, but yeah, unfortunately I mistimed my punch there, so I missed, let's see, about 12 notes. I was about 12 notes short of 100, so I'm going to have to make up those 12 notes elsewhere. Upcoming here is 450 skip. So it's the same clip as FP early. Ooh. And yeah, that's what can go really wrong with it. So yeah, as I said, if you miss one of those clips, you lose about 40 seconds. So it's very dangerous. But luckily I got the other one first try, which was good. And we just have another go at it. Hopefully I can get it this time. There we go. So I have 386 notes here. Usually I have 397, so I have to pick up 11 notes somewhere else. What I'm going to do is I'll go into winter and click Lock Wood. Usually we skip that. Yeah, so that was 450 note door skip. We're not supposed to be in this bit of the lair yet, but the whole point of going here is to open up Mad Monster Mansion. Now the reason we want to open up Mad Monster Mansion is because in Mad Monster Mansion you get the pumpkin transformation, and you can use the pumpkin transformation to raise the water level in this room and kind of the surrounding 2 rooms. What raising the water level does is it allows you to progress through the lair and access the last 2 levels, Rusty Bucket Bay and Click Lock Wood, and it also lets you access the final area of the game. Now with RBA, or Reverse B Adventure, the whole idea is we want to get to Click Lock Wood as soon as possible, and then after that we want to get to the B and kind of go back and do a lot of levels. So yeah, we're going to get into Click Lock Wood as soon as possible, and that means that we have to raise the water level as soon as possible, which means we need to open Mad Monster Mansion. If we had a skip for raising the water level, then we could actually do Mad Monster Mansion after Click Lock Wood and get into Mad Monster Mansion without paying the 10 jiggies using the B. And that skip would probably save about 10 or 15 minutes in this category. Now, we haven't actually found a way to skip the water level on N64, but we do have a way to skip raising the water level on Xbox. So this game was re-released for Xbox in, I believe, 2008, and when they re-released it on Xbox, they changed the camera controls so that instead of camera buttons, you have a camera stick. And in doing so, they actually broke the demos that play at the start of the game. So what you can do is you can hold the camera stick at the start of the demos, and it sort of flicks the camera around. Now what the demos normally do is it just plays off a list of buttons for Banjo to press, basically. So if the camera's pointing in a different way, Banjo will be doing different stuff. And that can cause desyncs in the movement for the demo. So what we do on Xbox is we actually go to the Rusty Bucket Bay demo in Engine Room, and we cause Banjo to die in there. What happens when Banjo dies in a demo is you gain control of Banjo, and you can sort of start playing. So when Banjo dies, you start playing, you have all the moves, you have a lot of feathers, a lot of eggs, and you have 25 Mumbo tokens. You don't have any notes or jiggies, but you do start in Rusty Bucket Bay, because it puts you back there after you die. So when you start in Rusty Bucket Bay, you're already above the water level, and you can sort of raise it from there. So that that would save a lot of time. And you might be thinking, well, then Xbox surely must be much faster than N64. But there's also some things that you trade off with Xbox. So in this game, you can skip text by pressing LR and B. But on Xbox, nothing's actually mapped to the L button, so you can't skip text on Xbox. You can still skip some text, but not all text. And yeah, so that loses a lot of time on Xbox because you have to read through so much more text. Also, the other thing about Xbox is you notice I did Termite skip earlier in Mumbo's Mountain with that slope manipulation. That doesn't work on Xbox anymore. And there's a few other things. Loading zones are faster on Xbox though, so you get some time back there. And there's lots of other little differences. Also, you'll remember I mentioned about Door of Grunty skip earlier that saves 25 jiggies. That trick doesn't work on Xbox. So there's all these trade-offs and everything, but at the end of the day, it works out that Xbox is about 8 minutes faster. So as I said, I have the record with a 111 on N64, and I also have the record on Xbox, which is a 103. So there's a pretty big difference, but I wanted to run the N64 version in this marathon, primarily because it's more familiar. So starting in Spiral Mountain and progressing through the layer is more familiar than starting in Rusty Bucket Bay and going back. And also, the Xbox version is not marathon safe. because that demo glitch actually disables saving. So if the game were to crash or something, or if I got a game over on Xbox, then it would be all over. There would be no save file for me to come back to. So that's sort of why I chose N64 for this marathon. But I'll talk about the leaderboard a little bit later. There's a leaderboard for this game on speedrun.com, and all the runs can be found there. They're really well documented. That bat is very annoying. It can knock you off the roof like that. But that's alright, we just get back up. I might kill it this time. So also with this game, I've talked about the differences between Xbox and N64, but there's also some differences within N64. So there's two things sort of called PAL and NTSC, and PAL is the Australian and European version, and NTSC is the American and Japanese version. And traditionally, so NTSC games usually either run at either 30 or 60 frames a second, and PAL games run at either 50 or 25 frames a second. So traditionally, NTSC games are actually a lot faster than PAL for speedrunning, because they literally run faster. But by 1998, they were sort of figuring this out. So the developers of Banjo actually made Banjo move a little bit faster on PAL to compensate for the game running slower. So it all evens out eventually, and Banjo's movement works out to be exactly the same between PAL and NTSC, which is really good. And but it's not completely compensated for. Some of the cutscenes are still a little bit slower on PAL. So at the end of the day, when you don't take into consideration glitches that do and don't work on the two, PAL loses about 20 seconds to NTSC. But some glitches are actually only possible on PAL. The method for RBA that I'll be doing later only works on PAL. And for a very, very long time, any percent on N64 was actually PAL only. But last year, Stivity Bobo found a method to make RBA work on NTSC, which means that pretty much anyone can have a good go at it. The only issue is if you're playing the Japanese version or a slightly later American version, termite skip is fixed, so you lose time there. So right now, anyway, right now I'm playing on PAL. Right now I'm playing on PAL, which sacrifices about 20 seconds. Although you'll remember that Treasure Trove Cove early that I did before? That trick is a lot more consistent on PAL, specifically the clip to get out of bounds. Also, I learnt this category when it was PAL only, and as a result, I still sort of play on PAL. I do play on NTSC for 100% though. Alright, so now we're going to go and get the pumpkin transformation. What normally happens in Frazizi Peak is I finish in Mumbo's skull, and I sort of die. But as I'm dying, I land and wake up Mumbo, and I can skip this text as I'm dying. But since I died earlier in Frazizi Peak, I just have to sit there and wait for the text to go. So that's a little time loss, but it's not a huge deal. So now we've got the pumpkin transformation. Optimal movement with the transformations is that you should jump as you start moving. Similar with the Banjo movement, jumping allows you to gain speed instantly, but if you just start walking, then it takes a little while to speed up. The difference with the movement is though, with Banjo movement, you have that slide after you jump, and at the end of the slide, you lose a lot of speed. But with the pumpkin, you don't have that slide, so I can just jump once and I don't have to keep jumping. Also, it's good to jump up slopes and run down slopes. Just little movement stuff that is, yeah, really important to save those few seconds. Now we've got a bit of downtime here. Does anybody in the audience have any questions about the run or anything else? Why do I run NTSC for 100%? That's a great question. So the two main reasons that I run on PAL for this category is Door of Grungy Skip and Treasure Trove Cove Early. Treasure Trove Cove Early is easier on PAL. Door of Grungy Skip I'm just more used to on PAL. Both of those tricks though we don't do in 100%. So that's why I take the 20-second time save by playing on NTSC. There's also some parts of 100%, like Rusty Bucket Bay. Certain parts of Rusty Bucket Bay are easier on NTSC, and that makes NTSC better for 100% as well. Sorry? I can't quite hear you, sorry. How difficult is it to learn? There's a few different routes. So a lot of people play 100%, and 100% has a route that's pretty easy to learn. But the most advanced route for 100% is quite difficult to learn. Any percent, on the other hand, has a few really difficult tricks in it, but I would highly recommend any percent as a category, especially the Xbox version. Xbox any percent is the fastest version, and it's actually probably one of the easiest categories to run. In terms of movement and stuff like that, it's easy to learn, but it's difficult to get really, really good. Yeah, I probably will get those 12 notes in winter. With the RBA glitch, as we're taking the B into most of the levels, there's a lot of notes that we can't get as the B because you just can't get into those areas as the B. So, yeah, my hands are tired for what notes I get. I'm going to have to go into winter. Okay, so I've just raised the water level, and yeah, that's important to progress through the lair. What we used to do in this run was after we raised the water level, we would reset, and that brings us back to kind of the start of the lair, and we don't have to do all this walking back as a pumpkin. But ever since TTC Early was found, we're not getting the Clanker's Witch Twitch Jiggy anymore. And the reason that we used to reset is because the Clanker's Witch Twitch Jiggy is near the start of the lair, and that's just a really good time to get it. So we've cut out that reset, and that actually has an interesting implication on PAL. So PAL version gives you a choice of 3 different languages, English, French, or German, and it turns out that the German language is actually 1 second faster for this game. So that difference comes from Spiral Mountain when you talk to Bottles. That thing is 1 second faster in German. Now, as I said, there's a quiz at the end of this game, and I don't trust myself to be able to do the quiz in German. I can do it, but I would probably get a few answers wrong, so it's not worth the risk there. But what we used to do when we reset is we would play the first half in German and the second half in English, but we don't need to do that anymore. So I'm going to raise the water level again here and try and Talon Trot just as the cutscene starts. I missed it. But what can happen there if you do that? If you land the Talon Trot, then Banjo doesn't rise up with the water. So you're actually a lot lower to get into this pipe here. Coming up is a trick called 640 note door skip. And as you might expect, it skips the 640 note door. It's using a type of clip that I call a ledge clip. And what basically happens is Banjo gets hooked on a ledge and he sort of stays in place. But as that happens, he builds up a lot of downward speed and then eventually falls through the ledge. So we'll be seeing that here. And this trick's really important for the run. So I just have to flip the camera around first, so I'm going to jump out and in. And then we're going to get hooked on this ledge here. There we go. Now we're out of bounds. So the reason we raise the water level is so we can actually have enough height to get there. And now we're past the 640 note door without 640 notes. So yeah, that trick is really important because it lets us get to this later area of the game earlier than we really should. Normally we would have to have gone into at least 7 levels to get to this area, but I've only been into, I think, 5 levels. Yeah, 5 levels. And yeah, that allows us to get to Click Clock Wood a lot earlier, which allows us to do RBA earlier, which means we can use the B to get into 3 levels rather than only 1 that we would be able to if we didn't have 640 skip. That glitch was found by Chronicies in 2012, shortly after Door of Grundy skip. That was a very good time for Banjo glitches. So I'm actually going to talk to a Brentilda here. So she tells you secrets about Grunty, and so I'll just have to take some time to read these and write these down. Hog breath. Putrid parrot puke. Gruesome green. Alright, so the reason that I talked to Brentilda there is for the quiz at the end of the game. Now, normally the quiz at the end has all these questions, sort of like stuff about the game, like how many Gs did it take to open Mumbo's Mountain, or here's a picture of a character, who is it? Or here's a song, what level is it from? But there are some questions which ask you secrets about Grunty, and we can't just remember the answers, because they actually change every game you play. So every time you start a new game, shortly after you finish Mumbo's Mountain, it kind of randomly generates what those answers to those secrets are going to be. Now there's 30 questions, and each question has 3 possible answers. So you might be thinking, well, there's 3 to the power of 30 possible sets of answers that it could be. And that would be really bad if that was the case. But luckily it's not. So the way it actually works is there's 256 possible patterns, and it just picks one out of those 256 patterns. We have a program that we use where you can enter sort of what answers you already know, and it uses that information to deduce what pattern it could possibly be. So right now I've entered those 3 answers that I've got, and it tells me I have 8 possible patterns left. So when I get to Furnace Fun, I might still get some answers wrong, but I'll have a much higher chance of getting them right than if I had no other information. And this was really good when it first came out, because before that, runners used to kind of just guess. And yeah, that was really bad if they had to just guess. So it saves a lot of time. It was originally Bonapartes who kind of did the research and made the original tool for that, and that was in 2015. Since then, Mittens has made an updated version of that calculator, and it's a lot more user-friendly and nice to use. Also, Mittens has done lots of work for this community in making a practice ROM. So if you have an EverDrive, you can sort of use that to practice the game and things. And Mittens has also found a lot of setups for this game, so he's done a lot of stuff. So I'm opening Summer right now. The gimmick of this level is there's 4 seasons, you gotta go into each one. And if I ground pound the recoil animation, I don't actually take any damage in that recoil animation. So I don't take any full damage there, I can just fall straight down and I'm safe. So that's all I'm doing in spring. I'll be back here later though. And in each season, there's a switch to open the next season. So we have to do these chronologically, so to speak. The whole purpose of going into these seasons now is to get as many notes as we can. Normally in any percent you just go up to Autumn, because Autumn has the most notes. Winter doesn't have too many notes. Oh. But due to that mistake in FP, I'm going to have to go into Winter. So you saw I killed a bird there and it gave me a cutscene. Normally we want to avoid that cutscene, because it just takes a little bit of time. It only happens on the first bird though, so now I can kill it. I'm going to try and jump around these 3 birds here. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of scary, and those birds actually get bigger each season. So I can jump around them in spring really easily. Summer's a bit harder, but in autumn we don't even attempt to jump around them. It's too hard. So I'm just going to be cleaning up some notes here. From this point on, we've opened all the levels that we want to open, and we're going to be skipping the Door of Grunty as well. So I actually don't need any more Jiggies from now on, and I only need a few more Mumbo tokens to get to the 25 that I need for the bee. Yeah, that's a pretty dangerous part as well. Luckily I saved it. And yeah, so you can see how out of the way we're going for these Mumbo tokens in this run as well. We just need all that we can get our hands on, really. So now Autumn's open and we're just going to head into there. Going to get a few notes on the way though. So Autumn has the most notes in it. That's why we want to get there desperately. But if it didn't, then we probably would just go to Spring and get the bee transformation and then leave. There's a funny thing about the snare bear enemies in this level as well. They're these things here and they're very dangerous, but they don't hit you if you jump on them from the back, so they're not too scary. The intended method, if they're holding an item, is to use gold feathers to get that, which we'll see in Autumn. So I'm going to use gold feathers to get this token here. Yeah, normally these snare bears give you 2 damage, so yeah, it can be really dangerous if you do get hit by them. You can get their items without gold feathers. There's a method to do it, but it's a little bit slower and it's really risky, so we just don't go for that. The Taz would do it though. And if it wasn't for these snare bears, we probably wouldn't learn gold feathers in the run. The gold feathers do save time in a few other places though. Now I can't jump around these birds in Autumn, but I can jump under them. Sometimes they hit you though. Just gonna grab some health because things do 2 damage in this level. And when I get to the top of Autumn here, I'm gonna have to remember to hit the winter switch because we need those backup notes. I didn't have quite enough height to jump up there, so I used a ground pound to get a little bit more height. Upcoming is the area with Nabnut as well. So he has kind of a text trigger, but you can jump around it if you're really careful. Similar to sort of the Mumbo's skull thing that went on earlier. And I want to jump in the window rather than the door, even though the door is closer to where I want to go. When you jump in the window, you don't have any animation of sort of Banjo walking out of it. But if you go out the door, he just takes a little while to walk out. Now this is a scary part, but we'll get through it. So these slopes are slippery as we saw in summer, but similar to Termite Skip, you have a second on the slopes before you slide down. So I use that to figure out when I can jump. And we're almost done in Autumn. So I could walk back out of Autumn, but leaving Autumn that way is kind of slow. So what I'm actually going to do is clip out of bounds to get out of Autumn. So with this game, if you go too far out of bounds, you do something called voiding out. And what voiding out is it's kind of like dying, but the game doesn't consider it a death. So with voiding out, you just go too far out of bounds, and it'll bring me back to the start of the level, but it won't take away life, and it won't reset my progress on the notes. So it's really useful for getting back to the start without having to die and lose all my notes. So here's a clip similar to 640 Skip. Just build up enough downward speed and you fall straight through. This is where the route is going to diverge from my normal route because I have to get these backup notes here. I'm going to have to try and remember where 11 notes are in winter, but we'll see how this goes anyway. Alright, we should be good. I'm going to get 12 just so we have a backup one. Alright, there we go. A bit of on-the-fly routing. Lots of fun. And now we can sort of return to the normal route that we would normally use in, say, a world record attempt. So I'm going to come back into Spring. We call it Spring 2 because it's the second visit. The whole reason that I have to go into Spring again is to get the bee transformation. You can only take the bee into Spring. If you try and take it into the other seasons, it de-transforms you. So yeah, we have to end the level on Spring so that we can leave us the bee. I'm actually a Mumbo token short, so I'm going to have to get the backup token. So that clip that I actually did to get out of Autumn is, funnily enough, called Spring Clip because I use it in Spring at 100%. It's found in Spring. It's just one of those things that sort of has a funny name. But you get that when you're dealing with something that's historically been a little bit different. Alrighty. And we can head to Mumbo's. Being on 1 health is really good here because I'm going to do a death warp. It's much quicker than exiting normally. So now I'm the bee, which is the most broken transformation in the game, as we'll shortly see. And RBA is coming up. The method for RBA that I'm going to use is PAL only, but there's another method that works on NTSC, which is basically just as fast. It's even a little bit faster. So we're going to fly up into this corner here. Very easy to void out here, so I gotta be careful. That red tunnel there has a trigger to de-transform you back into Banjo, but we can just fly past that because we're out of bounds. So the bee is not supposed to be here, and it's gonna severely break the game. If the bee lands in some water, he'll sort of hit the water and fly upwards, so I've got to fly out of bounds to get under this water here. This is the room with Rusty Bucket Bay, and Rusty Bucket Bay is normally closed. Well, it is closed. But there's no roof on this room, so we can just fly right over it. And that just saves 12 jiggies right there. Alright, so this is where the run gets really fun and where any percent looks very different to 100%. We got all the jiggies that we want and all the Mumbo tokens that we want, but there's that big bottleneck of the 810 note door. So we're going to go around and collect a bunch of notes as a bee, as many as we can. You'll notice that I don't get anywhere near 100 notes as the bee in basically all the levels because there's a lot of areas that the bee can't get into very easily. For example, in this room there's windows that you would need to break to get into. Now we're in engine room and I got to do a clip to get into engine room properly. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow. That was pretty fast, which is good. And you probably have very fond memories of Engine Room if you played this game. It's not quite as bad as the bee though, which is very nice. You can still hit these fans and it's really bad if you do hit these fans, so you have to be careful, but it's much easier than Banjo Engine Room. And the clip that I used to get in here is really important, because if that clip didn't work I couldn't actually get into Engine Room. You'll see there's a door here that's blocking me from coming in the other way. So this next room that's coming up here is really easy to take damage in. Hopefully I don't, but it could happen. So we'll see how it goes. Alright, I took it a little bit safe there, but at least we're not dead. Now these grill chompers here, they do 2 damage every time they hit you. I have 5 health at the moment, so if I were to take 3 hits from them, I'd be dead. And there's lots of health that lies around in this game, but you always need some way of damaging something to get it, because the health is always in an enemy or a beehive or something like that. So when I'm the bee and I have no way to do any damage, I actually can't get any more health. So if I start losing health, that's going to be really bad. The only way to get health back is to die. And if I die, I lose all my progress on these notes, which we don't want. Coming up next is probably the worst room in this level, but it looks cool if I can get it done right. So I'm going to take some intentional damage here, which means that I only have 2 hits left that I could take unintentionally. And that just gets that note quickly. And we're going to go and get the other notes. So there's another part of this room where it's really easy to take damage. You can get these notes before they come out, but I'm just waiting for them to do their thing before I get those notes. So that room can be done a lot quicker, but that's sort of the safe method that I want to use in the marathon, because otherwise it puts me on 1 health. Hopefully I can get these 3 notes in flying. Almost. If you can get them in flying, it saves a little bit of time. So with B movement, you just want to get as much as you can in flying, and it can be pretty precise at times. Now you'll notice that I bounced off the toxic water there without taking any damage. That's because I'm a transformation, so any transformations don't take damage from environmental things like that. So it goes for all transformations, even the washing machine. Another example of that is that I won't take damage from these hot stoves here. So yeah, it'll come in handy in Bubble Bloop, Swamp, and Gobi's Valley because of the sand and the swamp water. I'm going to try and get these 2 notes here in flying. These can be a bit annoying, but there we go, there's 1. There's the second one. So as you can see, rather than landing, it's much, much faster to get everything in flying. But with that comes some issues, because with flying, it's really hard to lose height. It's very easy to gain height, but yeah, losing height's tricky. And that's pretty much Rusty Bucket Bay done. So we're only going to have 85 notes here, but that's all we need. So you have the option of voiding out or dying here. I'm going to go for the void out because I want to save as many lives as I can. And now we're off to Gobi's Valley. So the water's going to push me up, so I need to fly over this wall to kind of get out of this room. So it's really lucky they didn't put any roofs on these rooms. Yeah, as I said before, there's also a category called No RBA, which does all the levels as Banjo, but it's still an any %. That's probably about 9 minutes slower than this category. And sort of the reason for that traditionally is because RBA for a really long time was PAL only, which means you could only do it on the Australian or European consoles, but now you can do it on anything. I'm just going to fall into Gobi's Valley here. There we go. They didn't seal it at the top very well because Banjo can't get up there. So as with the hot stoves and the toxic water, the sand also doesn't hurt the bee, so we can just walk past and freely get all these notes. And if you've seen some Banjo-Kazooie 100% speedruns, you might remember a trick called Gobi Clip, where Banjo can clip into this Sphinx here. We're going to do it as a bee, but it's a little bit easier than the Gobi Clip for Banjo. There we go. So the bee is a little bit shorter, so it walks right under. Unfortunately, I missed one of the notes there. You can get all 3 of those in flying, but it's quite difficult to do. Luckily, I'll be able to get this one on the way back. We got a bit of downtime with note collecting here, so if anyone has any more questions about the run or anything else, I'd be happy to answer them. Is Kazooie better than Tooie? Oh, Kazooie's way better. I like Tooie, the game mechanics in Tooie, but Kazooie has a bit more charm, I think. There's something very charming about Grunty's Lair and all that. Also, I like the controls a little bit better in Kazooie. The camera works a lot better for me. But I've heard a lot of speedrunners of Banjo-Tooie criticize the camera in Banjo-Kazooie as well, so you know it goes both ways. How do you get behind that door? So there's 2... Yes, you can. You can get in... There's actually quite a few clips to get out of bounds in this level, both as Banjo and the Bee. So once you get out of bounds, if you have flying, you can just fly right back there. Sorry? Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is why I like this category so much. It's lots of fun to do the bee movement. Any clips? The bee in general can do more clips. So, yeah, the reason the bee is so good is because a lot of the rooms don't have roofs on them. So you don't actually have to clip, but you can just fly over the top. If you saw FP early and TTC early before, you can't do either of those as the bee, but the bee can get into FP and TTC. In general, slope clips as well, like 640 skip and that spring clip. The bee can do those, but it's a lot harder. We're pretty much done in Gobi's Valley now, so you'll notice I only have 77 notes, and that's because there's a lot of pyramids that you can't get into as the bee very easily. You can pretty much get 100 notes as the bee in this level if you try really, really hard, but it would take a very long time. Because you basically have to clip into every pyramid, and there's only really one spot you can clip as the bee in Gobi's, and flying around out of bounds is pretty slow. So I'm off for the last level in the run here, Bubble Gloop Swamp. And we could fly over the top of the room to get into Bubble Gloop Swamp, but we have another method. We fly over the top of the room on Xbox, but in N64 we can just clip through this door. There we go. It's very easy to come out the back there, so you have to be very careful with that clip. This is one of my favorite levels in the run, because there's no loading zones. It's just 3 minutes of collecting as many notes as you can. There's quite a few technical parts in it. So yeah, with the bee movement, as I said, you're going to be flying a lot, and when you're flying, you have to hold B to go fast and R to turn good, and you can imagine holding R and B on an N64 controller and trying to press A to adjust your height. So it's not very easy. So I've actually developed... So I've actually developed a claw grip, like so. I don't know if you can see that or not, but yeah, that's how I fly as the bee anyway. With the maze here, you have to fly between the notes because it's faster than walking, but when you fly, you have too much height. So losing height is one of the things that you really have to optimize. But as you can see, I'm just landing on all the walls. So that makes it a lot easier. And this is one of the hardest parts of bee movement to learn because these walls are really thin and landing on them can be quite precise. A little bit low here. See, this is why it's so bad to have a lot of height. There's a backup life that I can get here as well, but luckily I do have enough lives because I didn't take the Death Warp in Rusty Bucket Bay, so I'm just going to leave that for now. And we're pretty much done in Bubble Gloop Swamp here. I will just check my totals before I leave that I actually do have enough notes. Because we had that mistake earlier, I just want to make sure. But in a serious attempt, you would never check your notes because you're always grabbing the same notes with the same route. It there's no improvisation when you're going for serious attempts, unless something goes really wrong. So I should have 811 notes here, hopefully. Yeah, okay, cool. So that'll be enough to open the 810 note door and finish the game. And there are note doors past the 810 note door. There's a few that hold refills for eggs, red feathers and gold feathers. There's also one that holds the double health. Of course, we don't need any of those in any percent because they're not essential to beating the game, so we don't get them. But we do actually have a method to get the egg refill without opening that note door, which we'll see soon. So I'm pretty much done with all the levels here, and I'm just going to take the red cauldron to the end of the game. The red cauldron was really useful for opening Click Clock Wood and navigating through the layer to do that, and it's useful here as well. And as I said before, I talked to some Bruntildas and I have 8 Furnace Fun patterns left, which means that I might get some questions wrong in Furnace Fun due to no fault of my own, but it shouldn't be too bad. And I'm going to try and do another talent shot into loading zone here. I've landed a few throughout the run, but it's not a big deal, honestly. It was a little bit early, so I had to watch both the animations. So yeah, now we're into Furnace Fun, the worst part of the run. I got my trusty Furnace Fun calculator. It's important to note that that calculator doesn't like read any values from the game that we don't know about. It just uses all the information that we do know. So there's no funny business going on with it. We've got different types of questions here. There's banjo questions, which are general facts about the game. This is a picture question. Picture questions are very, very slow because they have to load the area that the picture's in. This is the first grunty question. So I know that that one's Putrid Parrot Pig, so I should get it right. I should put a headphone in for the sound questions. We learned Talon Trot and Mumbo's Mountain. And we got some sound questions coming up. So I know what move is done by my bird. It's Wonder Wing. Yeah. So you don't actually have to listen to the sound questions. You can sort of remember. What world is this from? Clanker's Cavern. And that was a Joker square. So that square can have any type of question on it. The reason we do the Joker square is it gives us these 2 cards, and we can use those to skip any 2 squares we want. We're going to skip these minigame squares because the minigames take a really long time to do, and it's just quicker to go to all the Joker squares. But you can get a grunty question on a Joker square, so if you don't know your Furnace Fun pattern, and you get a grunty question on the Joker square, and you get it wrong, you don't get another shot at that Joker square, and you have to start Furnace Fun all over again. And that's sort of why I went to grunty before I went to the Joker square, just so I could reduce my pattern a little bit before attempting it. The Death Square as well can have a grunty question as well. That's a reference to Donkey Kong too, the gorilla throws barrels. The Death Square can have a grunty question too, so you have to be careful with that. Gruesome Green is the colour she chose. So I've had really, really good luck so far. I haven't got any questions wrong. And yeah, there's lots of RNG here, so it's a really painful part of the run. And it can really kill a good run. Which character has it? It's Navnut. There's another reference, Conquer the Squirrel. And they also have Humba Wumba from Banjo-Tooie as one of the answers. X. Now, upcoming is a trick called Furnace Fun Skip. So right now there's sort of these invisible walls that are stopping me from walking around too far. Like, watch, if I try and walk up there, I can't. So I can't just... Spotty Purple's the most likely answer, and it was right. So I can't just run to the end, but I can do this, so... Now I'm going to purposely get this one wrong. So I actually don't know what the wrong answer is, so I'm just going to let it time out. Alright, that was the right answer, I guess. That's extremely unlucky. We're going to have to do Furnace Fun again. Sorry. There's really nothing I could have done there. So what I'm going to do is just going to... there is a backup that you can do, but I'm not going to try. I'm just going to try Furnace Fun again. So yeah, nothing I could have done about that. That was purely RNG, but it happens. And I've got 0 lives, so I have to be really, really careful. Anyway, now that gives me time to talk about Furnace Fun Skip a little bit more. So there's these walls that are usually up that stop you from just running to the end of Furnace Fun. Yeah, and with the death squares you saw, I got one wrong before and it flung me into the lava. And what happens with that, so it flings you into the lava, but by standing on a particular spot, you can, by standing on a particular spot, it doesn't succeed in flinging you into the lava. So I'm just going to grab this extra life behind this death square. I really hope it's not a grunty question. This is Gloop. So this is just a safety extra life here. Anyway, so what Furnace Fun Skip does is it's sort of, yeah, it doesn't succeed in flinging you into the lava, but it takes down the walls so that it can fling you into the lava. So the result is that you're basically walking around on the board with the walls down, and you can just run to the end. So Furnace Fun Skip was found in 2015 by Obliterator, and it's also known as ARB Skip because Obliterator. And it saved a lot of time in both any percent and 100%. Because normally with Furnace Fun, what's happening is you get to the end and then you have to view these sort of fake credits before you get to have a go at the real ending. And yeah, Furnace Fun Skip just skips all that. It also skips a portion of Furnace Fun itself. This is a death square, so I have to be really sure not to get this wrong. And upcoming is actually a trick called Dora Grunty Skip or Dog Skip. I was talking a little bit about it before. And Dora Grunty Skip is really, really, really hard. So it's a frame perfect trick, which means that I have 1/25th of a second to do it, and it's a jump that you have to do. So yeah, 1/25th of a second to do a jump, and that jump is sort of in a different spot most times. It's really inconsistent when you have to do that jump. So yeah, let's hope that that doesn't take too long. Alright, I've got my pattern for Furnace Fun now, so this should be okay, hopefully. I stand right on the corner here. What's wrong with Captain Blubber? Well, I think he couldn't remember his name. Oh no, I got it wrong. But, there we go. So now we can just run to the end. Yeah. So yeah, and this room is the 810 note door, the big bottleneck of any percent. It would be 40-minute category if we could skip this, but we can't. There it is. Somebody find a skip for that, please. Oh, there we go. Okay, so that's Dora Grunty Skip. I cannot understate how difficult that is, but yeah, very inconsistent, so it could take you that long or it could take you, you know, several minutes. So it's really brutal at the end of a run, but, you know, that's a bit of fun. Also, I got the X through that note door without opening it. Ground pound recoil to not get hit by that. Am I gonna shoot 3x? That ground pound recoil thing was similar to the full damage cancel from earlier. Alright, this is the hardest phase of the fight coming up, the beak bombs. I have to hit her with 4 big bombs, and yeah, they're really hard to land, so let's hope we get them. But every time she shoots more and more fireballs, so you actually get a little bit more time to line up every time. She's going to shoot 3 fireballs this time. Oh, there we go. So I didn't miss any, which is really nice. And we got a cutscene overlap coming up. So these Jinjo statues are going to pop up out of the ground. We're going to try and poop eggs into them as the cutscene of them popping up out of the ground is happening. There we go. Oh. Alright, this will be interesting. There's a very, very, very rare glitch that can happen where you actually softlock the game here. So let's hope that doesn't happen, because that would be bad. That's good. Alright, that glitch didn't happen. So with that cutscene skip that I did before, there's a chance that if you do it wrong, the statues don't load properly, and then you just can't shoot eggs into one of the other 4 statues, and then you just can't beat Grunty. So I would have to do the fight again if that happened. I've only ever had that once, and I've only ever had it happen on NTSC. We think it's something to do with lag. Alright, here's the last statue. We just got to shoot 5 eggs into each side of this. We sort of have to manage moving around the statue so the fireballs don't hit us, though. Alright, that's time. Yeah, so that's Banjo-Kazooie any %. It's lots and lots of fun. You should definitely consider learning it or some category of Banjo-Kazooie. You can play it on pretty much any version. Now, if you look on speedrun.com, there's a leaderboard for all the categories of Banjo-Kazooie. And more importantly, there's also on speedrun.com, on the Banjo-Kazooie page, there's links to lots of useful resources. So like the Furnace Fun Calculator that I was using, guides, tutorials, and most importantly, the Discord. So the the Discord is really helpful. You can use that to talk to pretty much anyone in the community, and yeah, everyone in the community is really helpful. So if you're looking to learn the run or just want to know more about it, we'd be more than happy to help out. So that again, speedrun.com, just look up Banjo-Kazooie. That page has lots of resources and the leaderboard with all the world records and stuff. So yeah, thanks for having me here. Yeah, it's been lots of fun. And come talk to me if you want to know more. It doesn't really matter too much. Like 20 seconds. I'll just show the game time if anyone's interested, but we use real time. Nah, I've got mine on me. That's the game time, 1:15:46.